Tell me if this sounds familiar.
The environment and the economy have to go hand in hand.
People are barely getting by, and they're definitely not getting ahead.
I believe that a better way is possible.
Those are called talking points, and as you can see, a lot of politicians use them. Some are easier to spot than others, but experts will tell you that leaning on them too much can risk sounding like a broken record.
As I've always said.
If that's the case, why do politicians use them so much?
A talking point is to try to keep the politician on message. It's to make sure that the message that was identified as a potential winner for the party is brought forward by the candidate, by the politician, when he or she answers a question.
This is Carl Bélanger. He's a political strategist and former national director of the NDP.
When politicians decide to freelance and say whatever, that's when you can create problems for your campaign.
That's why parties create a message guide. They'll identify key positions on any given topic. Then they'll script short, digestible lines, talking points, to reinforce that message. And then politicians repeat those lines a lot. And keep in mind, they spend money on carefully researching those messages. Think focus groups, dial groups, online polls.
Political parties want to be able to control the message. They want to make sure there's consistency. They're concerned about their brand.
Alex Marland is a political scientist. He's writing a book on message discipline. He says the 24-hour news cycle has made talking points essential.
There's no question that politicians are using talking points more than they did, but that's partly because they're being required to speak more often than they did.
Leaders need to be able to respond to a range of questions, and no one wants to be caught off guard. For example,
We have recently switched to drinking water bottles out of when we have water bottles out of a plastic, away from plastic towards paper, like drink box water bottles sort of things.
Trudeau had just announced a plan to ban single-use plastics across the country. He didn't seem to expect a question about how his own family cuts down on plastic waste. One of the earliest examples of message control in Canada is in this article from 1911. It describes something called the Speakers Handbook. It was basically an encyclopedia of party speeches and answers to questions raised in Parliament over the years. During a campaign year, parties would send out their handbook to candidates across the country to use in their own speeches. Strategists call this imposing message discipline. Today, it's maybe even more important, and that Speakers Handbook has evolved into daily emails with talking points on any given issue during the campaign.
Talking points help them understand fairly quickly what their party's position is and allows them to be consistent with other members of their party.
It's why you sometimes see party politicians and cabinet ministers repeating exactly the same lines as the party's leader.
A clean environment and a strong economy
go hand in hand.
People are barely getting by,
And they're not getting ahead.
And in the case of local candidates, parties really don't want anyone saying something that's radically different from the party line.
You cause problems, but and you might be ostracized within your party, certainly by the leadership.
On the flip side, Marland says that raises questions, though, about the health of our democracy.
What we don't know as citizens is if a politician is indeed really forcefully advocating for our behalf, on our behalf, and constituent interests behind the scenes, or if they are just simply, the expression is often trained seals.
Politicians also deliver lines because they want the public to actually absorb the message.
The first rule of political communication is to repeat, repeat, and repeat. When you start to get bored with your answer, that's when you know that your message is finally punching through.
No one really agrees on a magic number. Some say you need to repeat a line 7 times, or 12, or 20 times. It might be why you remember this from the 2015 campaign.
The only choice to keep us moving forward is a strong, stable, national majority Conservative government.
So let's make sure on October 19th we get a strong, stable, national majority Conservative government.
And this.
This is a tougher economy than it needs to be for the middle class, and those working hard to join it.
Strategists argue the problem is really when politicians stick too closely to the script.
You don't want the politician to repeat word for word the same line over and over again, because then the risk you're running is that you don't look authentic.
Sometimes when politicians stick too closely to a script, it can almost sound like they're deflecting. Today on Power and Politics. Earlier this year, I asked Jagmeet Singh if he supports the development of the LNG project in BC. Instead, he talked about climate change in a totally different pipeline.
British Columbia's got one of the most ambitious climate change plans in North America. They've got an aggressive plan. My concern is that what we need to do is, we all know this, the future of energy in not just Canada but in the world has to be a future where we're not burning, we're not fracking, and we're not using fossil fuels. The energy has to be renewable. That's the future of Canada. And my focus is on, right now, we've got a project in front of us at the federal level, which is Trans Mountain Pipeline. That project cannot go ahead.
That's a great answer for Trans Mountain, but I asked you about BC and LNG,
well,
right?
BC's
do you support the project?
The BC's got a great plan.
Communications trainers will teach politicians to try and circle back to their talking points. They call it pivoting. Ideally, though, they'll still sound unscripted.
All election candidates affiliated with a political party will probably have been told, look, we don't want you being robots. We want you to put things in your own words. Otherwise, if you get detected, this is going to turn into a story in itself.
On the other hand, speaking spontaneously can also get you into trouble.
Freelancing for a political leader, can dog him for years if it's an important issue.
This is Stephen Harper's former campaign chairman, Tom Flanagan. It was 2002, and Harper was the newly elected leader of the Canadian Alliance Party. He was answering questions when he went off script and said this about Atlantic Canada.
There is dependency in the region that breeds a culture of defeatism.
Flanagan says Harper was trying to say that Liberal policies were holding Atlantic Canada back from realizing its full potential, but Maritimers saw it as a slight against them.
Well, the consequence was that in the election of 2004, when this issue was still very much alive in Atlantic Canada, we did very poorly in that region. We didn't win nearly as many as we hoped to win.
Ultimately, experts say most politicians wouldn't be able to do their jobs without talking points. Because we live in a world where everyone has a camera, it's just too risky to come unprepared. Has a talking point stood out to you? Let us know in the comments, and you can also find our sources below the video.